r/Nosleep. Posted by you/thatonecityinchina. I put out a Craigslist ad for a new roommate to ward off my stalker and avoid violating my lease. My new roommate might be a demon. Part 3. Hey, guys. It's been a while, but I'm back with more strange stories with my demon roommate, Hector. Lately I've been wondering if this is all a weird fever dream or if I finally lost it from the stress of college debt, but I've decided to just let it all go and go with the flow. If you're curious as to what I'm talking about, you can brush up on my previous misadventures here and here. Hector also says hello, and mentioned our door is always open if you want to send him a fried chicken delivery. He's been hooked on Korean fried chicken lately. That being said, living with Hector hasn't been so bad. I had to admit, Hector was really quick in picking up human customs and what was acceptable and unacceptable of him as a roommate. Even though there was a lot he still had to learn, once he was corrected for his behavior he never made the same mistake twice. And overall, he tried his best even if his best wasn't exactly the greatest. He didn't leave half-eaten fried chicken lying around anymore, and he went out of his way to get me 3 new goldfish to replace the ones he had eaten. I kept up my end of the bargain and supplied with him fried chicken, even when it wasn't on Fridays. I also learned a lot about him. I learned that the physical form he currently inhabited belonged to an actual guy named Hector Sanchez who died in the 1920s. A few of you guys mentioned that a demon's weakness was its real name, and that I should try and figure it out just in case Hector ever backstabbed me and tried to eat me. Luckily, I didn't have to beat around the bush for it. Hector did tell me his real name, but I couldn't pronounce it, so he agreed to just keep it simple and continue calling him Hector. It turned out that he had a lot of limitations while in his human body. Although he was immortal, he was basically a walking shell of a zombie, and had he been a real human, he would have died a long time ago from severe malnutrition and lack of sleep. That explained his increasingly awful-looking dark circles. The only reason he was alive was because he couldn't physically die, but I bet if the body had a mind of its own, it would have really wanted Hector to end it all. The body was running on pure caffeine, fried chicken, and demonic essence. I tried to get him to eat more balanced meals, but he refused to eat vegetables because they had no soul. Hector really liked R&B music. He stopped belting songs in the shower in the middle of the night, but I still caught him humming Beyoncé's classics while he reheated his chicken. He had a pretty good voice for a demon, and I wondered if the real Hector Sanchez liked to sing when he was alive. That being said, Hector was strangely into personal hygiene, and our bathroom was stocked with various candles and hygiene products, including 3 different bottles of face wash and various brands of shampoo lying around. He got me into skincare routines. He also really liked watching TV, and that's basically all he did when he wasn't out and about looking for the next best fried chicken joint. Because he technically didn't need sleep, he spent 24 hours at a time watching every single show on Netflix. I think he made a personal goal to finish every single show there was on Netflix before moving on to Hulu. Despite living with him for a while, I never saw his full demon form. The closest I saw was his back in the subway incident. He'd always make me avert my eyes, saying I couldn't see because it would shock me or whatever. It was stupid, but I agreed that I wouldn't push the matter further. He mentioned it took a lot of energy to revert back, because his strength decreased considerably in my world, and it took a lot of fried chicken for the soul to replenish his strength. The main problem I had with Hector now was his lack of an income. I kept my word and tried hooking him up with several jobs, but eventually accepted that he would be unemployed for a while due to his strange mannerisms and tendency to mess up everything he did. Hector had no papers, identification, or even a degree, so it was hard to find him a job that he could get hired at. I had to fabricate a resume for him. He got fired as a butcher because he kept eating the raw meat, all captured on security footage. The owner was not pleased and was disturbed, to say in the least, and Hector was let go quickly after that. He got fired from the mattress store for loafing around, lying down on the mattresses, and watching Netflix shows on the phone I got him when I replaced my own. He couldn't even hold down a job as a cashier at the nearest grocery store because he tried to take all the money from the cash register on his first day. He didn't understand why he wasn't entitled to taking the money. We had a long talk that night about the importance of following the law. So needless to say, it was very difficult trying to find Hector a job. I was also busy with my own schoolwork and my job at the startup, so I didn't have much time to research for him. I also had to deal with managing my exorbitant student loans, so I was close to losing all hope of finding something for Hector. But as luck would have it, I finally figured out a way Hector could make money and use his demonic backgrounds to his advantage. And it came in the form of a paid exorcism from Christopher Pollock. A little backstory: Christopher Pollock is my ex. We went out briefly after matching on christianmingle.com. An account I made as a joke a couple of years ago. I thought he was a decent enough person to go out with, and he was a good guy. But things just didn't work out. He was deeply religious, to the point where he never missed a Sunday prayer session, and his car had Bible verse bumper stickers plastered on the trunk. He was the altar boy for his local church until the age of 16 and was working on becoming a pastor for the same church. That was the kind of guy he was. I just wasn't into the whole religion thing as much as he was, and that was a huge deal breaker for him. I never expected to run into him again. I also never expected to see a video of Chris's sister, Mabel, go viral on the internet, but a lot of weird things have happened to me in the past few weeks, so it didn't really surprise me. I followed a few Christian pages on Facebook after the brief religious phase with Chris, and by that morning, the video of a possessed little girl had at least 2 million views with the clickbait title, "You won't believe the terrible grip of sin that Satan has on this 10-year-old." Curious, I clicked on the video, only to see Mabel Pollock tied down to her bed with a bunch of restraints, screaming profanities in a foreign language and thrashing around. I only recognized her from her room layout. Whenever I went to Chris's house, I had always made sure to visit Mabel and bring her some treats, and her room looked to be the exact same as it was when I broke up with Chris. Mabel, on the other hand, looked like a different person. The video looked like it was filmed with a camera from 1995, but through all the pixels you could see the bare gist of what was going on. She was malnourished, like she hadn't eaten in days, and her entire body was bruised and bloody. Her face had scratches all over, almost as if she had scratched herself. Her eyes had blood coming out of the sockets. She looked like a mess. I could have sworn I heard her screaming, "Death to all humans," in the middle of her furious rant in tongues. The video cut to her crawling on the floor and the walls, throwing herself at her bookshelf, threatening to slit her own throat, until she was finally put in a straitjacket for her own safety. I managed to track down the video to Chris's original Facebook post. He claimed he had planted a hidden camera in the bookshelf which recorded his sister during a failed exorcism, and posted the video to Facebook and YouTube in hopes of someone reaching out and finally being able to cure his sister. The original post was posted 2 weeks ago, and since then people had been trying to help her to no avail. Priests called her possessed beyond help, psychiatrists called her psychotic, skeptics accused the video of using special effects to mimic a possession, and some asshole Facebook users made some really fucked up memes about her with a particularly bad screenshot of her possessed face. It was terrible. But as terrible as it was, I saw a gleaming opportunity. Chris's caption included all the gory details about his sister's situation, and also included hefty monetary compensation for anyone who could help his family out. And that's where Hector came in. "Oh yeah, she's totally possessed. No doubt about it," Hector said, distracted by his Popeyes and the latest rerun of How I Met Your Mother. I showed him the video in hopes of inspiring him, but I clearly needed to coax him into my plan a little more. "So, would you be able to do something about it?" I asked, rewatching the video of Chris's sister screaming and wailing in her bed, thrashing against her restraints and speaking in tongues. It gave me chills. "Not like an exorcism, but maybe you can fight the demon within her or something?" I probably could after this episode. "Why do you care so much, though? People get possessed all the time. It's not a big deal." Hector shrugged, still fixated on the screen. "Alright, so I have a confession." I sighed. Hector raised his eyebrows, interested. "The girl in the video is my ex's little sister. You remember Chris? I think I remember mentioning him once in a conversation. I kind of messaged him and told him that you were a priest/exorcist and that you could get rid of demons, and he's super religious, so he really believes in that kind of stuff. His sister's a good kid, but she's been pulled from school. She spray painted dicks on the school playground and on all of the faculty's cars, lit someone's hair on fire, and wrote Hail Satan all over the chalkboards and bathroom walls." "Ha, that's funny," Hector said, gnawing on his bone thoughtfully. "Satan's ego probably inflated from that. You know, his ego's already big enough cause he has a bunch of cults dedicated to him, and the only thing he did was backstab God or whatever. Like that doesn't happen all the time. But God doesn't even care anymore cause it happened like centuries ago. They golf together now." Okay, not the point I'm getting at. The point is, Mabel's a good kid, and this has been going on for 2 whole weeks, maybe more. The possession is really taking a toll on her and her family. They're great people. And if she dies because of this demon, then they'll be devastated. "You're a demon. Can't you go and, I don't know, talk to the demon inside her? Maybe even convince him to leave nicely?" Hector shook his head. "Nah, if I were to do this then I'd have to go all out. Demons don't listen to words. We have to take care of things physically if we want to settle things once and for all." I pushed my phone in his face, trying to get him to see the gravity of the situation. Are you willing to fight this thing? Whatever's possessed her is literally destroying her from the inside. It would be morally shitty for us to just ignore it knowing we can do something about it. Hector grabbed the remote and muted the TV as soon as ads came on. He swallowed his bone whole and nodded. Alright, sure. Sounds fun. But what's in it for me? What do you mean? I mean, do I get anything out of it? I don't want to waste my time if there's nothing in it for me. Hector's eyes had a greedy glint to them. I pondered for a moment. You'll get the satisfaction of doing something good for someone else? Hector looked unconvinced. I rolled my eyes, clearly he needed something more motivating than that. Chris's family is filthy rich and will pay you enough money to pay rent and supply you with fried chicken for a month. I deadpanned. Hector shot up ecstatically. Start talking. Hector didn't enjoy his priest get-up very much. He thought it was itchy and unnecessary, but we had to make this as convincing as possible. I found a priest costume on Amazon for $30, complete with an iron cross, black robe, white collar. Clergy stole everything a person needed to look like a priest. I was worried the iron cross would hurt him, but he brushed it off, saying that was just another gimmick humans made up to feel like they could ward off demons when in reality it did nothing. When he donned the outfit, he really did look like a priest, maybe a Great Valley priest, but a priest nonetheless. Alright, Father Sanchez. I emphasized Hector's newfound priestly identity as we got on the train. Let's go over how to act like a priest one more time. Right. Use big words, sound like a good person, and reference the Bible every other sentence. Got it. Hector replied. I grilled Hector on his priest persona until we got it down to a T. Shockingly enough, Hector told me he had been to church before for the free food back in the 1900s. I was surprised he didn't spontaneously combust into flames upon entrance, but he told me that was just a myth that humans made up to feel more secure against the evils of demons or whatever. I learned that there were a lot of common misconceptions humans had of demons and angels. Demons simply avoided religion because it had a tendency to make people overzealous, but humans believed it was because religion and holy objects were their weakness. In reality, demons just didn't want to bother with all the crazy shit that came with religion, including witch hunts, crusades, and the stereotypical pedophilia. I reminded Hector not all religious people were like the ones he saw on the media, but he stuck by his beliefs nonetheless. We went over his act a few more times as we took the train down to the suburbs where Chris lived. Chris greeted us at the train station. Finn. Chris said stoically, shaking my hand and giving me a curt nod. I'm glad you're here. Chris. I nodded back and returned his stoicism with my own brand of stoicism. Hector looked amused by our tense exchange. You look good. I lied. He looked like he hadn't slept or eaten properly in days. Chris turned to Hector and shook his hand, enclosing Hector's hand with both of his in a grateful manner. And you must be Father Sanchez. Thank you so much for coming. My family truly appreciates you taking the time out of your busy life to come and help us in this time of need. Hector had to stop himself from snorting. Yes. Nice to meet you, Christopher. I am so sorry to hear about your sister. That truly sucks. I elbowed Hector, reminding him to sound professional and holy. I mean, it sucks in that it's horrible that your sister was possessed, and hopefully I will be able to, exorcise the sins out of her. Bible quote, I whisper, reminded through my teeth. Hector glanced at his palm quickly, where he wrote down some random motivational Bible quotes. They were all smudged. He had to wing it. The Bible says that the Holy Spirit will always triumph the devil. Isaiah 4:13. He gave Chris an awkward thumbs up for reassurance, even though he completely misquoted the Bible. Chris raised an eyebrow but didn't question Hector's quirky mannerisms. I wanted to facepalm. Chris then ushered us into his car, and we went for a short, tense car ride to Chris's house. In the car, he explained the situation fully. This all began to happen 3 weeks ago when Mabel accidentally scraped her knee while playing hide-and-seek in the church's graveyard with her friends. Why they were playing hide-and-seek in a graveyard, we didn't know. Kids were weird. According to other priests, the blood from her knee and her proximity to evil spirits in the grave allowed the demon to enter her body without anyone noticing, and she began to truly act up a week after her knee healed. That sounded stupid, even to me. She probably just got unlucky and was at the wrong place at the wrong time when the possession occurred. Hector looked skeptical at such a shoddy explanation as well, but thankfully kept his mouth shut. Chris pulled into his gigantic driveway and we got out of the car. Hector looked out at the sheer size of the house. Here we are. Just a warning, Father Sanchez, please don't be too shocked when you see Mabel. I'm aware you've seen many possessions in your day, but her case is truly unique. Other priests have compared her to the likes of Annalise Michel, or even worse. No one has been able to even approach her within 5 feet of her bed without getting something thrown at them. She's escaped the straitjacket we got for her every single time, and we're really at our wits' end with her," Chris said, opening the door to his 6-bedroom house. Immediately, we heard screams of agony and pain, and I flinched. Hector merely blinked. Chris closed the door behind us as we walked in. "Oh yeah, Annalise Michel's case was pretty bad. I think, 5 demons were fighting for possession over her body and they went way too far. Those demons got into a lot of trouble for that one." Hector whisper chuckled. I elbowed him again, reminding him that he couldn't say those things in this ultra-religious household. We ascended the stairs, and the screams and slams got louder and louder. Chris looked like he was in pain hearing his sister's wails, and I felt bad for him. I knew he cared a lot for his younger sister, and seeing her like this must have been hard for him. In front of Mabel's room were Chris's parents, holding wooden crosses to their chests like it would protect them against this evil entity. They seemed to be whispering prayers under their breath, eyes closed shut. "Mom, Dad, Father Sanchez is here." Chris gently prodded them from their prayers. His parents stopped praying, shot up, and profusely thanked Hector for his kindness and generosity. Chris motioned for all of us to be quiet. He turned the knob hesitantly, and opened the door just wide enough for us to walk in. As soon as we walked in the room, we had to duck as a lamp flew over our heads and just missed hitting Hector. Hector looked extremely annoyed at that. I couldn't truly tell from the video, but Mabel looked like a completely different person. I remembered her as a slightly plump, happy blonde girl with the brightest blue eyes who always had something funny and sassy to say whenever I addressed her. Her cheeks were sunken in and her eyes were hollow and dead. Her hair was basically a bird's nest and was tangled beyond saving. Her pajamas were ratty, torn, and soiled with bodily fluids and what I thought was excretion. She looked like she hadn't showered or done laundry in weeks, which was probably accurate. A gross mix of drool and blood was coming out of her mouth in copious amounts, and she was muttering demonic chants under her breath. I heard the words Hitler and Satan spew out from her mouth in a nonsensical rant against society. Her hands were planted on the wall, and she was crawling through the walls like a spider and scratching herself until blood came out of her skin. She grabbed onto her headboard and banged her head against the frame of her bed, screaming in tongues, screeching in what I thought was a mix of German and English. Chris hung his head. Hector stood in awe. Mabel scurried her way back to her bed, where she began experiencing an epileptic seizure, wailing to the ceiling about wanting to die. "Yup. Definitely a bad case of possession," Hector remarked as he set down his suitcase filled with holy items. If he was going to play the part of a priest, he had to look, sound, and act the part 100%, and it would have been more believable if he had things that people usually used in exorcisms, like the Bible, incense, and bottles of holy water. He knew none of them would actually work, but it helped him look legitimate. Mabel assumed a frog-like position, and her eyes were rolled back in her head, giving her an extremely disturbing look. Her jaw was now stuck in a perpetual screaming motion. She began to exclaim bloody murder at me and Hector, and I saw some veins in her neck ready to pop from the stress she was putting on her vocal cords. She grabbed a toothbrush with a sharpened end from her bed and held it to her neck, threatening to stab herself in her jugular vein if we didn't leave the room this instant. She also said some things in some other foreign languages which I didn't understand, but I'm pretty sure they were a slew of more expletives and profanities. She scratched at her cheeks, and I noticed all 10 of her nails were ripped off somehow and bleeding profusely. "Get out," Mabel rasped. Her voice was grated and raw from so much strain on her vocal cords. "Get out now." "This is pretty bad," I remarked. I made my way to Chris, trying to sound as serious and professional as possible. "Look, Chris, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to leave this place. Take your parents out with you and drive at least 10 miles away from this house. Father Sanchez can only do his thing when there are less people in the area. Trust me, his methods are very different from what we're used to, but they work." "What about you?" Chris asked. "Will you stay here?" "Yeah. Trained with Father Sanchez and he needs me here with him for this to work." I kept the wording vague. I didn't want to go into too many details. "I thought you were still working your IT job." "Yeah, well, student loans aren't gonna pay themselves. Gotta work 2 jobs to make ends meet, you know?" Chris looked a little conflicted that I was essentially kicking him out of his own house, but nodded reluctantly, knowing this was out of his expertise. "All right. Are you sure you don't need me here?" "Positive," I replied, ushering him out. You'll just be in the way. I led Chris out of the room and walked him and his parents back to his car, instructing them to drive away as far and fast as possible. Once I made sure Chris and his family vacated the house and drove away far enough, I ran back upstairs and shut and locked Mabel's door. Hector loosened his collar, cracking his neck, and took his ponytail out of its elastic band. "You can drop the act now," Hector said to Demon Mabel. Demon Mabel stared back at him, still sitting like a frog on the bed. She then grinned, revealing teeth that were cracked and knocked out. I hoped it was her baby teeth and not her adult teeth, otherwise there was going to be a lot of money going into dental implants. The voice that came out of her throat was gravelly and satanic, and didn't sound at all like the lovable 10-year-old I once knew. "Ah, I knew it was you, brother. Nice to see you again. What the fuck are you doing here in that pathetic excuse of a human shell?" Demon Mabel sneered. "And tell me, how is being kicked out of hell? Don't you have better things to do than to possess little girls?" Hector asked, rolling his eyes as he unwrapped his fake clergy stole. He tossed it over to me. Demon Mabel began to thrash again. "This girl is almost ripe for the feasting. I have been marinating her for weeks. And now she is ready. I will give you the option to leave now. If you do, I'll share. And I might be able to put in a nice word for you to father once we eat this little girl's soul together." She licked her lips. "Little girls are the best. So fresh. So deliciously pure." Hector visibly cringed. "Way to sound like a sexual predator. Possessions aren't cool anymore, man. And besides, you know I don't do the whole eating humans thing anymore." Demon Mabel went through another demonic seizure thrashing from Hector's insults, and I used this opportunity to approach Hector. "Am I missing something, or did that demon just call you brother? Are you two related?" I hissed. Hector shrugged. "Yeah, we're all related. There's only, 7 fathers in hell. We're not made from moms and dads like you are. We're just created whenever they feel like creating another entity to do their bidding. Now stop talking and do what we went over. It's go time." Hector whispered back quickly, pushing me away in the direction of Mabel. "Right." I began to sidestep my way to Demon Mabel's side surreptitiously and tried my best to recount the plan Hector and I came up with in the train ride to Chris's house. Hector theorized that the demon residing within Mabel's body was most likely a small and lowly demon, fresh out of the wombs of hell. After all, the only demons who tried to possess humans, especially young children, were the ones that didn't have enough strength on their own to venture out and fight other demons over other older, juicier human souls. Possession helped them grow bigger and stronger, and size was a huge thing in hell. The bigger you were, the more powerful and wise you were in relation to the other demons. The smaller you were, the weaker and stupider you were. And every demon had to start somewhere. Hector told me that he himself was considered pretty big and taking out this lower demon wouldn't be a problem, but we had to get the demon to physically come out of Mabel's body. Hector hypothesized that the demon would try and inhabit Mabel no matter what because it knew that we wouldn't want to hurt her. And that was our biggest obstacle. That was why we had to get Chris's family as far away from the house as possible. Hector was planning on reverting back to a half-demon entity to get the other demon out of Mabel once and for all, but if Chris and his family saw this, they would all probably have died from shock. And that was where I came in. I had to coax his family to leave, saying that the holy incantations or whatever only worked when less people were there. At that point, they were willing to believe anything and they went without a fuss. The second part of the plan was for me to grab Mabel once Hector figured out the demon's name. Hector would distract the demon with casual banter as I snuck near enough that I could jump when the time was right. Hector knew the name of each and every demon in hell, not because he had a particularly good memory but because demons gossiped a lot and he used to be popular enough to be in the know about all the latest gossip. Apparently there were a lot of scandals in hell that put our tabloids to shame. In any case, he just needed to get a good look at Mabel and he would have been able to tell who it was. A demon's weakness was its name, and he knew that once he physically said the demon's name, it would be rendered shocked and paralyzed for a split second. In that split second, I was to grab Mabel and hold her down while Hector physically extracted the demon from her soul. A demon needed some time before repossessing a body, so in that time, Hector would keep it away from us. Then he would kill the demon, consume it, and all would be well. Mabel would be fine and he would get the money. Theoretically, it worked. But we never got to practice this in its execution and I was worried that in all my nervousness, I would mess up and hurt Mabel. She was already in such a fragile state as is, and I didn't want to make it worse. We had no other choice, though. We were already so far in and it wasn't like there was any better options out there. Hector gave me the signal. He looked at me and nodded towards Mabel. It was time to put the plan into action. Hector uttered the demon's name. I can't even spell it because it was so long and incomprehensible, and Demon Mabel froze in place from the seizure. Demon Mabel then began to scream. I immediately lunged at her, wrapping her torso in the fake stole in one motion to keep her limbs from thrashing too much. Mabel's jaw opened so much it looked as if it was unhinged, and her eyes rolled back in her head. From her mouth slowly emerged, in a mess of sticky saliva and blood, a smaller gray creature that looked like an undeveloped fetus. Its head was larger than its body, and it had 3 bulging eyes on its face, each eye a different size and shape. It had one oval-shaped mouth with small teeth lining the sides, and its body looked like a pot-bellied child. Its limbs looked scrawny in relation to its big stomach. It really was tiny, compared to what Hector was emerging into. Hector's half-demon form was scary in its own way. He already warned me that I would be shocked at what I saw, but I really wasn't ready for this. He was easily 3 times the size of his human form and was really pushing the limits of what the room could hold without breaking apart. His top half somewhat looked like a human's torso, except it was impossibly large and covered in pitch black, shaggy fur. His bottom half resembled a mutant horse. He had 6 hooved legs and a tail with a small flame at the end. His face was no longer that of a human's, but more of an elongated, cracked and scarred skull with those large antlers that I saw in the subway. His neck stretched like a giraffe, and he had a gaping hole in his stomach area where smoke was coming out. He looked like something straight out of a horror movie. If this was only his half-demon form, I couldn't imagine what he looked like as an actual demon. Sorry you have to see this, Hector apologized, sounding somewhat genuine. I kinda wanted to keep you from seeing me like this cause I think I look pretty ugly. His mouth kind of resembled that of a dog's, with gigantic teeth and a long, forked gray tongue. I shook my head, assuring him it was fine. I've lived with him for too long for something like this to faze me. Besides, there were bigger problems at the moment. Don't worry about that now, The demon wasted no time in lunging at Hector, even though it was greatly outmatched in size. The demon was smaller than me, which was funny considering the circumstances. It could have probably still mauled me, though. Hector just casually swatted the demon away with his gigantic hand, and the demon tumbled outside of Mabel's room. Hector followed suit, and because he couldn't fit through the doorway he ended up breaking the wall to get through. I groaned. That was going to be a bitch to explain to the poleaxe. Hey, can you be more careful? We can't destroy their house if we want to get paid. I yelled, worried about the monetary compensation. Yeah, sorry, I'll be sure to keep our demonic conflict to a minimum because trying to get rid of this guy isn't difficult enough already. Hector called sarcastically. I winced. I kind of deserved that. I heard a high-pitched screech coming from the hallway, and hoisted Mabel into a fireman hold as I ran out to see what was going on. I arrived just in time to see Hector kick the smaller demon down the stairs, then jump on top of the demon, crushing it with his weight. However, the smaller demon managed to grab a kitchen knife at some point, and he buried it into Hector's leg. Ow! Hector howled in pain, and the demon used that as an opportunity to frantically scurry away. Hector swiped at his leg and at the demon at the same time, but lost balance and fell over to his side. He crashed into the poleaxe's intricate display of china plates, and they all cracked under Hector's weight. I held on to Mabel tightly as the demon glanced at us. It gave a shit-eating grin and swiftly ran in our direction. It probably figured out that he could repossess either one of us and make it harder for Hector to fight it. I ran back as far as I could, but realized the hallway was at a dead end. Determined to protect Mabel, I turned my back to the demon so it would knock into me instead of her. She'd already suffered enough, and if the demon was going to target someone, it was going to be me. But the demon never made it far enough. Hector had caught up to the demon, swiftly brought out his claws, and slammed his hand through the demon's stomach area. I heard a gross squelch as the demon's 3 eyes widened and it let out a shriek. What I could only describe as demon guts came spurting out of the demon in large quantities, and it went limp almost immediately after Hector shoved his hand back out. I could feel the demon guts splatter on me and I groaned in disgust. Once everything seemed settled, I turned back to face the demon and Hector. Inside Hector's hand was a pulsating, stomach-looking organ that he tipped his head back and swallowed. I heard an audible gulp, and dark smoke fizzled out of Hector's dog-like mouth. He then swallowed the demon whole. The small demon slid down Hector's esophagus easily. Almost immediately after he swallowed the demon, Hector's fur began to shed at an alarming rate. I watched as all the fur and large body melted away to reveal Hector's human form underneath it all. He looked tipsy, teetering from side to side. Hector did mention that it took a lot of energy to do this, and he was probably extremely tired. I propped Mabel up against the wall, ran behind Hector, and caught him just as he lost balance. I've got you, I reassured him. Hector looked dazed and mumbled in confusion. "Get a hold of yourself. Why is fried chicken talking to me?" Hector asked, head swaying from side to side. I sighed. He was probably seeing things from exhaustion. I dragged him over to where Mabel was and propped him up next to her. I grabbed his stole and shoved it into his arms so he could put it on again to look presentable for the family. Hector didn't look like he was in explicit pain, just fatigued and maybe suffering from the demon equivalent of indigestion. He did mention before that eating a fellow demon wasn't pleasant. It was akin to a lactose-intolerant person ingesting dairy even though they knew it was bad for them. In fact, his dark circles looked worse and his normally tan skin looked grayish. I checked his leg for the stab wound from the smaller demon but saw nothing, to my relief. Hopefully he was just tired and nothing more. "Are you okay? Is it all over now?" I asked cautiously. Hector burped loudly and refocused, eyes rolling back in his head a few times before he could finally fixate his gaze on me. "Yup. 'S all good. But that was the nastiest tasting thing I've had in my life, and I've eaten cow intestines before," Hector said. "My stomach hurts. I think I threw up in my mouth." Hector pulled on the fake clergy stole. I scoffed. "He was fine." "Wait. Does this violate anything for you? Does eating a fellow demon break any rules of yours?" I asked, genuinely curious. I should have asked this earlier but it didn't occur to me that this could have been a violation of Hector's world's laws. I felt like Hector was breaking a lot of rules in this world and wondered if there would be serious repercussions back home. And though it wasn't really my problem, I was also a little concerned. Yes, obviously. You humans throw cannibals in jail when you catch them eating other humans. What I did was basically cannibalism but even worse. It's kinda looked down upon for bigger demons to bully smaller demons. You didn't bully it. You saved someone's life. Yeah, also against the rules. Demons don't save people's lives unless we're contractually bound to them, we torture them and eat them. Saving them's for the angels. Shit. I rubbed the back of my neck nervously. So are you going to get in trouble? Well, I don't know. I've always been good at finding loopholes so I guess I'll have to figure something out. And is Mabel? We both looked over to Mabel, who still seemed unconscious. Her body was still bruised and battered, but she was breathing softly and was probably just knocked out from exhaustion. The sleep deprivation and thrashing the demon forced her to go through definitely took a toll on her little body. "She's fine," Hector said, waving her off. "I mean, she'll be fine physically. She's probably gonna need a lot of therapy after what she just went through, though." The Polacks could not thank Father Sanchez enough for his unorthodox methods of exorcising the demon. Even though he created a huge mess in their house, they were grateful when Mabel woke up and wasn't speaking in tongues, throwing books, and spinning her head 360 degrees every 5 minutes. Besides, they chalked the damage up to demonic activity and didn't blame Hector like I thought they would. As promised, they provided the $10,000 in cash installments for helping their daughter. The local church even threw in a couple packs of rotisserie chicken after hearing Hector loved chicken. They coupled it with a self-fryer and a bucket of frying oil, all wrapped up nicely with a bow and everything. Hector was ecstatic. This was more than he had bargained for. It made up for him being forced to eat the demon and suffer a week of indigestion. Mabel woke up confused and bound to a hospital bed. She still suffered from severe malnutrition and various other physical ailments, including an unhinged jaw that they had to bolt back together. It was a miracle she was still alive, considering her neck did suffer through a lot of 360-degree spinning while the demon possessed her. She didn't remember anything from her time possessed, except a large black deer monster fighting a smaller, baby monster that her parents believed was a side effect from the possession. After a few days, her bruises and cuts began to heal up, and she was able to stomach light soups and soft bread without throwing it all up. The doctors said she would be just fine, which was a miracle in itself. They still couldn't figure out why she was so injured and refused to accept that it was a possession. I couldn't blame them. I used to believe in cold, hard science, too, but now I knew better. On a positive note, Mabel really liked Hector, and Hector seemed to like Mabel back. He straight up told her about how he fought the demon, and she ate it all up, asking copious amounts of questions and demanding the gruesome details. Her parents thought he was just humoring her. Little did they know. Chris and I remained amicable. From his perspective, he was just glad his sister was safe, but also had small reservations about Hector. He said that he felt a weird energy from Father Sanchez. I shrugged in response, saying Chris was probably just imagining things from being so unhinged by his possessed sister. He left it at that. Hector's successful exorcism in curing the impossible reached the ears of the church community quickly. and he was immediately extended invitations and pleased to travel across the country to heal others. But Hector refused, saying he had enough to survive off for a few months and told me he would take jobs on a case-by-case basis. I agreed and left him alone. He now had a source of income, and though it wasn't exactly steady or orthodox, we didn't have to worry about rent. In fact, I set up a website for him, putting my degree to work. I titled it Father Sanchez's Exorcism Hotline, where people could input their requests and write out the details of why they needed Hector to visit and bless them with an exorcism. This allowed us to keep track of the requests easily, and we had received a lot of requests in a matter of weeks. Now I had a new problem. My apartment reeked of fried meats from him throwing just about anything he could physically eat into the fryer. The smell of oil was disgusting and stuck to my clothes. Hector seemed to have grown a strange affinity for it, but this was yet another entry I had to add to my ever-growing list of things roommates shouldn't do.